This crazy sound designed by Dutch artist Artifacts is more like a transition sound, but I used it here in a musical phrase and I still find it fascinating. Its main feature obviously is its pitch fall, and using it with successive short notes also leads to interesting effects, in particular harmonically speaking. Anyways, let's see how it works. Like many of the bass sounds in this playlist, it uses virtual analog waveforms. And the trick to get interesting effects based on these basic sources is using filtering and modulations, as always. Both Engine 1 and Engine 2 use a sawtooth, while the third engine, called the Utility Engine in Pigments, uses white noise as a source. Nothing fancy so far, but it soon gets trickier than you think when you go into the details. First, while both Engine 1 and 2 use the same initial settings, Engine 1 adds frequency modulation, phase modulation, and wavefolding to the signal path. That's why Artifacts use a wavetable instead of a classic virtual analog engine, because wavetable engine in Pigments allows to add these kinds of modulations. Let's remove the pitch fall to listen to the effect of these modulations to the sound and have a look at how they are set relative to the notes played to get a similar effect on all notes, except the period of modulation, of course. This period is set to the double of the note frequency, in other words, 1 octave above the note. We could have also used a ratio of 2 with similar results. Now let's use some FM, then phase modulation, and then wave folding. Now let's add filter 2, which is applied after filter 1 in the signal path. Filter 2 is set up as a notch filter, and LFO3 here is used to make a gentle modulation on the notch frequency. As said before, Engine 2 uses the same kind of oscillator, namely a wavetable that plays various analog waveforms. But although it doesn't use the FM and PM modulations like Engine 1, using the wavetable allows to easily switch between various waveforms. Let's play Engine 1 and 2 together and see what happens. Now, let's have a quick look at the noise generator and the utility engine. At first, it's very mild, but when you bring in the FX section, then you can clearly hear its impact. But we'll get back to the effects section in a minute. Before we do that, we need to add the iconic pitch fall that we heard at the beginning of this video. For that, we'll use a simple ramp function to control the pitches of both engine 1 and 2. You can also hear the period of the modulation slowing down. You might think that this is due to this modulation assigned to LFO2 rate, but if you disable it, you can still hear the period changing. What the is going on? Well, if you remember, we defined the modulation frequency for the FM, PM, and wavefolding relative to the note pitches. Since the note pitch is now naturally decreasing, well, the modulation periods are decreasing too. But then, what's the use of this LFO rate modulation here? Well, the designer, Artifacts, wanted to have the ability to modulate the volume of the filter 1 stage to create some sort of tremolo effect at will. Here he is using the mod wheel to add more or less of this effect. Look at the output volume of filter 1 stage when we use the modulation wheel in the bottom left. A large glide time was also added to allow for overlapping notes to fit in nicely when played during the pitch fall. Note that the always switch is off. That's to avoid triggering portamento for non-overlapping notes. And finally, the effects section brings it all together, with an important role played by the noise generator that we now clearly hear thanks to the compressor, while the classic chorus and the distortion stages give the sound all its character.